Welcome to Magnificat TV News, where the news of the church is offered. Today is Wednesday, May 15, 2019. The Pope has issued new measures to avoid sexual abuses from happening to minors and adults in the church. The Pope has said that there will not be women deacons, and therefore neither will there be feminine priests, and that whoever does not agree may leave the church. Pope Benedict's secretary, Monsignor Gonswain, has criticized those who abuse authority and want to create a new church from their position. The draft for the legislations that will rule the Vatican Cura have been harshly criticized by Cardinal Mueller, who considers that it should be assigned to professionals. Monsignor Schneider has asked the Pope for a public rectification for the Abu Dhabi document, in which it says that diversity of religion is willed by God. The Vatican has issued a motu proprio with the norms that shall be applied in the diocese to avoid sexual abuses.
Francis motu proprio, vos estis lux mundi, settles new proceedings to denounce harassment and violence, and to make sure that priests and superiors will be held accountable for their actions. It establishes the obligation for clerics and religious to report abuses.
Among the new developments is the obligation for all the dioceses in the world to have, by June 2020, one or more stable and easily accessible systems for the public to submit reports about sexual abuses committed by clerics and religious, use of child pornography, and cover-ups of such abuses.
Another development is related to the obligation for all clerics, religious men and women, to promptly inform the church authority about all the abuse complaints they may be aware of, as well as about the omissions and cover-ups in the management of abuse cases.
The document takes into account not only harassment and violence against minors and vulnerable adults, but also sexual violence and harassment resulting from abuse of power. This obligation also includes any case of violence from clerics against religious women, as well as cases of abuse against seminarians or novices of legal age.
Of the same importance are the paragraphs referring to the protection for those who come forward to provide information. According to the disposition in the modus proprio, those who denounce abuses cannot be the subject of prejudice, retaliation, and discrimination as a result of what they have reported. The seal of confession remains being absolute and inviolable.
The principle of presumption of innocence for the accused person is reinforced. The accused person will be informed of the existence of an investigation when requested by the pertinent dicastery. The accusation should only be notified if a formal process is initiated. The preliminary stage can be omitted if it is deemed appropriate in order to ensure the integrity of the investigation or the proofs.
The Pope has closed all opportunity to feminine priesthood and diaconate. At the same time, he invites all those who don't agree with this to leave the church.
During a meeting with the International Union of Superior Generals, Pope Francis has confirmed the refusal to admit women into the sacrament of orders in the rank of diaconate.
After giving his speech to the participants of the 21st IUSG General Assembly, the Pope has conducted a dialogue with the attendants. Answering a question, the Pontiff has said that, about the case of diaconate, we need to remember the beginning of the revelation. If such thing did not exist, if the Lord didn't want a sacramental ministry for women, it doesn't work.
And he has added, we walk on a firm and solid road, the road of revelation. We cannot walk on a different road, which may change the revelation and the dogmatic beliefs. Is that understood? We are Catholics, but if any of you want to start a different church, you are free to do so.
Pope Benedict's secretary, Monsignor Gonswain, has criticized those who abuse their spiritual authority and want to create a new church.
Archbishop Gonswain, personal secretary to Pope Benedict XVI, ordained 4 new priests in a monastery in Austria. In his homily, he stated that the duty of the priest is to remain faithful to the truth in the Gospels. And he rebuked those members of the church who want to invent a new church.
The prelate continued, "When priests, bishops don't have the courage to proclaim the Gospels forcefully and entirely, but just simply present their own words of wisdom, along comes disaster, and then the headlines appear."
He said, "A priest is not strong by his own power. He only has strength as much as he witnesses to the truth. Given that God entrusted that truth to his church, the church cannot proclaim anything other than such truth, whether at the right or at the wrong time."
Archbishop Gonswein advises new priests not to teach your own good ideas, but instead what God has given us. He explained, "This is not about our own dear words, but about salvation, and the strength comes from the sacraments."
Cardinal Mueller has criticized the draft of the Cura Reform, among other things, because it demotes the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith to a secondary position.
Cardinal Mueller, former prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, has criticized the draft of the Cura Reform presented to Pope Francis. He warns that the text does not have a convincing concept about the beginnings, essence, and mission of the Church. The Cardinal explains that it is a mistake to think of the Church as an international corporation with power balances between the headquarters and the local branches.
This draft for a future apostolic constitution is a cluster of subjective individual ideas, pious desires, moral appellations, with individual quotes from the council text and statements from the current pope. But above all, there is no clear distinction between the secular institutions of the Vatican as a sovereign state and the purely ecclesiastic justification of the Pope's supremacy as Peter's successor.
The draft will reinforce the fatal error in the Curia Reform done by Pope Paul VI, who transformed the state secretary into a heart of the Curia. According to his definition, he helps the Pope directly in the implementation of his highest mission. In his tasks, in other words, the Curia leadership, relationships with states, and the training of the pontifical diplomats. However, the Pope's highest mission is his teaching as member and the head of the College of Bishops.
Secular duties are secondary and by no means are materially linked with the papacy, and sometimes they have concealed its true mission in history. Placing the secular duties before today's spiritual mission is a mistake that should be avoided now.
Even if the universal teaching of the Church is the reason for the primacy of the Pope, in this draft the doctrine of the faith only appears as a random task for the Pope, among others, and it is subordinated to his temporal duties. The basic concepts of the Catholic theology, such as revelation, gospel, scriptures, apostolic tradition, or ecclesiastical magisterium, are used in a wrong or mistaken manner. There are no distinctions between revealed doctrine and the rest of the doctrine.
Monsignor Schneider has asked the Pope to publicly rectify the content of the document about religious diversity signed with Muslims in Abu Dhabi.
In reference to the document signed with the Al-Azhar Mosque's Imam, in which religious diversity plays a part in God's will, Monsignor Schneider has claimed that it is not enough the private clarification made by the Pope when he received the Kazakhstan bishops.
Schneider claims that the Abu Dhabi Declaration is still valid, and therefore a new gospel is being proclaimed, a gospel that is not the one taught by God's incarnate word, which was faithfully preached by the apostles and was passed on to the Church.
Monsignor explains, there is no room for doubts. What would St. Paul say today about this controversial formula in the Abu Dhabi Declaration? So far, neither the Pope nor any entity that speaks on behalf of the Holy See has made a public rectification about religious diversity in direct reference to the doubtful excerpts in the Abu Dhabi Declaration.
Monsignor Schneider affirms, in this way, the truth about the singularity of Christ as Redeemer of mankind and subsequently the faith on the Church as the only religion willed by God is being set in a relativized perspective, thus increasing the risk of denying the essence of the whole gospel.
editorial this week is dedicated to commenting on the norms issued by the Pope to avoid sexual abuses by the clergy.
El Santo Padre acaba de publicar un motu proprio dedicado a dar unas normas con las que hacer frente e intentar acabar con la plaga terrible de los abusos sexuales dentro de la Iglesia. Es un documento bastante bueno, es un documento que demuestra la honestidad, la sinceridad con que el Papa y la Iglesia en su conjunto quieren poner freno a lo que ha ocurrido y sobre todo para que no se vuelva a repetir. Sinceramente no sé qué dirán las víctimas, si estarán satisfechas o no. A mí personalmente me parece que es un documento, repito, que demuestra que la Iglesia sí que se toma en serio acabar con los abusos sexuales cometidos por algunos, aunque sea una pequeña minoría, de sus miembros más representativos, sacerdotes, religiosas y religiosos. Es un documento aprobado ad experimentum y con un plazo de 3 años, lo cual es bastante sabio porque en este campo las cosas evolucionan rápidamente y quizá en un tiempo habrá que hacer algunas modificaciones. Con esta idea de aportar algunas ideas que puedan mejorar un documento que en sí mismo es bueno, quiero exponer algunas cosas. En primer lugar, no dice cuál es el plazo de caducidad de los delitos, mientras que eso sí lo hace la ley civil. Tampoco dice si se refiere a cosas que han ocurrido en el pasado o a cosas que ocurrirán una vez publicado el motu proprio. Introduce el concepto de abuso sexual a adultos no vulnerables, es decir, adultos normales. Y introduce ese concepto, pero no deja claro cuál tiene que ser el motivo por el cual se produzcan esas denuncias, porque habla de violencia, y en ese caso es evidente que la violencia deja huellas, la violencia contra alguien, aunque sea un adulto, deja huellas en el cuerpo, pero también habla de acoso y habla de abuso de autoridad, de amenazas, y eso es algo difícil de demostrar. ¿Cómo se sabe que hubo amenaza o que hubo abuso de autoridad y no hubo consentimiento? E incluso cómo se sabe si se produjo o no se produjo ese abuso sexual cuando no hay huellas del mismo, y estamos hablando del caso de un adulto. En el caso de los menores, la propia ley civil establece que hay que dejar unos años, no solamente un tiempo, sino incluso unos años para que el menor, una vez ya alcanzada la mayoría de edad, se pueda recuperar y pueda presentar la denuncia. Pero en el caso de los adultos habría que decir que por qué no pusieron la denuncia de forma inmediata o por qué no se resistieron a que eso ocurriera. Además, convierte al obispo y al superior en una especie de policía. El documento dice que ante toda noticia o incluso que haya una sospecha fundada, pero ante toda noticia de que se ha producido un abuso, el obispo tiene que ponerse a investigar. Si no lo hace, corre el riesgo de ser acusado él mismo como un encubridor. Una cosa es investigar las denuncias, que eso es algo evidente y que por desgracia no siempre se ha hecho, y otra cosa es ponerse a investigar ante toda noticia, es decir, todo rumor. Repito, le deja al obispo y al superior en una situación muy difícil y muy complicada. El obispo puede llegar a convertirse en una especie de policía que investiga a sus sacerdotes ante el más mínimo chisme que se produzca en una diócesis. Y eso puede cambiar completamente la relación del obispo con su clero o del superior con los religiosos que tiene encomendados. De ser una relación paternal, una relación de afecto, a convertirse en una relación de investigación y de desconfianza. Y eso, insisto, puede ser algo realmente grave. Creo que no solamente los obispos, a los cuales les cae encima una carga muy dura e incluso arriesgada, sino cualquier religioso, cualquier sacerdote se puede encontrar ahora en una situación, digamos, por lo menos peligrosa. Una señora de la parroquia puede decir de su párroco, porque quiere quitárselo de encima, porque se ha peleado con él, porque no está contenta, por lo que sea, puede decir de su párroco que la tocó. No hay ninguna prueba, no hay nada. Mi párroco me ha tocado sin mi consentimiento. inmediatamente ya cae la sospecha sobre ese sacerdote. Oiga, que usted es una señora de 60 años, da igual, mi párroco me ha tocado. Un seminarista expulsado del seminario puede decir de su formador exactamente lo mismo. Incluso un cura puede decir de su obispo también eso. Oiga, es que estábamos en su despacho hablando y él se levantó y me tocó o me hizo una proposición. A mí se me ocurre que vale en esta situación, vale aquello del el viejo refrán de que cuando laves al niño en la bañera, ten cuidado, no sea que después de tirar el agua sucia, tires también al niño, tires al niño con el agua sucia, porque al final te quedarás sin el agua sucia, sin el niño, y tendrás que terminar por tirar la bañera, porque ya no tienes más niños que lavar. Si se crea en la Iglesia esa sensación de riesgo, de que cualquiera puede ser denunciado, empezando por los obispos, que creo que lo tienen bastante difícil con este documento, si se crea la sensación de riesgo, pues habrá muchos sacerdotes que no puedan asumir esa situación de riesgo porque está en juego su honor, está en juego incluso su vida y tendrán que dejar el ministerio. Incluso habrá seminaristas que digan, yo no me puedo meter en esto, aunque quiera servir al Señor, cuando cualquier denuncia, repito, por un adulto y sin ningún tipo de pruebas puede ponerte en la situación de ser reducido al estado laical o por lo menos desacreditado y humillado. Hay que tener mucho cuidado porque efectivamente hay que lavar al niño. Hay que evitar hay que evitar la plaga de los abusos sexuales y hay que poner todos los medios, pero con cuidado, no sea que lavando al niño tiremos el agua sucia, tiremos al niño y terminemos por tirar también la bañera. Recemos como siempre por el Papa y recemos por la Iglesia.
If you want to stay on top of what's happening in the church, you can do so on our website, catholicusonline.org. Until next week, God willing.